It usually doesn't start with a big mistake. It starts small, almost invisible, a busy week, a tight month, a bill you meant to pay, but didn't. You tell yourself you'll handle it tomorrow, or next paycheck, or when things calm down a bit. And for a moment, nothing happens. No alarms, no phone calls, no warning signs, just silence. And that silence is exactly why missing one credit card payment is so dangerous in America. Because the real cost doesn't hit you right away. It waits, quietly, patiently, and by the time you feel it, the damage has already started. Most people think missing a credit card payment just means a late fee. Maybe 30 or 40 bucks. Annoying, but manageable. Something you'll recover from next month. That's what the system wants you to believe. That it's small, temporary, not a big deal. But missing one payment doesn't just cost money. It changes how the system sees you. The moment that payment deadline passes, you stop being a reliable customer and become a risk. And once that label changes, everything else follows. Interest rates jump. Penalties stack. Promotional rates disappear. Minimum payments rise. And none of this happens loudly. It happens in fine print, in terms you agreed to years ago when life felt more stable. This is how one missed payment turns into a long shadow. Credit cards aren't just tools in America. They're judgments. They track your behavior, your consistency, your reliability. They remember mistakes longer than people do. And they don't care why you missed the payment. They don't care if you got sick. They don't care if your hours were cut. They don't care if your car broke down. They only care that the payment didn't arrive on time. For many people, that missed payment isn't about irresponsibility. It's about timing. Rent came first. Groceries came first. Gas came first. You made a choice, not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. But the system doesn't see necessity. It sees numbers. Once you miss a payment, fees hit first. Late fees. Interest charges calculated daily. Suddenly, the balance grows faster than it ever did before. And if you were already struggling, that growth feels impossible to catch up to. What makes this worse is how fast it spreads. One missed payment can trigger alerts. Your account might be flagged. Your credit limit might be reduced. Sometimes without warning. And when that happens, your credit utilization jumps overnight. Not because you spent more, but because the system moved the goalposts. That utilization spike hits your credit score, quietly, quickly, and credit scores don't drop slowly. They fall hard. A score you spent years building can dip in weeks, sometimes days. And here's the part most people don't expect. You might not even realize it happened until it's too late. There's no phone call that says, "Hey, your financial future just took a hit." There's no pause button. There's just a number changing behind the scenes, affecting things you won't notice until you need them. You apply for an apartment and get denied. You apply for a loan and get a higher rate. You try to refinance and get rejected, and you wonder what went wrong. That one missed payment did. This is another hidden cost. Delayed consequences. Credit systems are designed to punish quietly and reveal loudly. You don't feel the damage when it happens. You feel it later when you're already vulnerable. And for people living paycheck to paycheck, that delay is devastating. Because by the time the impact shows up, there's no room to recover quickly. Minimum payments increase. So now you owe more every month, not because you borrowed more, but because you slipped once. That extra amount might not sound huge on paper, but when margins are thin, every dollar matters. Now you're juggling again. Do you pay the card or the utility bill? Do you make the minimum or try to catch up? Do you skip groceries for a week to stay current? Stress creeps in. Sleep gets lighter. Decisions get harder. And once stress enters the picture, mistakes become more likely. That's how one missed payment turns into 2, then 3. And suddenly you're not behind because you don't care. You're behind because catching up feels impossible. Calls start coming in, emails, notifications, the tone changes. It's no longer friendly reminders. It's warnings, consequences, urgency, and shame. People don't talk enough about the emotional cost of credit card debt. The way it makes you feel small. The way it follows you everywhere. The way it sits in your chest even when nothing is happening. You avoid checking your account. You avoid answering unknown numbers. You tell yourself you'll deal with it later, when you're less overwhelmed. But later doesn't come easily when interest keeps growing. For many Americans, credit cards aren't luxuries. They're survival tools. They cover gaps when paychecks fall short. They handle emergencies when savings don't exist. They become lifelines in a system where one surprise expense can knock everything over. So when a credit card turns from helper to threat, it feels personal, like betrayal. Like the floor shifting under your feet, and the system knows this. Credit card companies don't make the most money from people who pay on time every month. They make money from people who struggle, from people who carry balances, from people who miss payments. The penalties aren't accidents, they're features. Once you're marked as higher risk, your cost of borrowing rises everywhere. Not just on that card. Other lenders see it too. Insurance companies, landlords, employers in some cases. One missed payment can quietly follow you into rooms you haven't entered yet. This is how financial mistakes become identity markers. You're no longer just someone who missed a bill. You're someone with bad credit, and that label sticks longer than it should. What's especially painful is how common this is. Millions of people miss payments every year. Not because they're reckless, but because life happens. Yet each person feels alone in it, ashamed. Afraid to talk about it. Silence protects the system again. People blame themselves instead of questioning why one mistake carries such long-lasting punishment. Why recovery is so slow. Why forgiveness isn't built into the system. And while you're trying to recover, everything costs more. Higher interest rates mean more money wasted on interest instead of progress. Higher insurance premiums mean less cash every month. Security deposits increase. Options shrink. Being poor becomes more expensive. Being stressed becomes more dangerous. And missing one payment becomes the start of a pattern you never intended. This is the part people don't warn you about. They tell you to be responsible. They tell you to budget better. They tell you to pay on time. But they don't tell you how fragile the system really is. How little room there is for error. How fast things can spiral when you're already stretched thin. And they definitely don't tell you how hard it is to climb back up once you slip. Because recovery doesn't happen overnight. Even if you fix the missed payment, the mark stays. Your score doesn't bounce back quickly. Trust isn't restored instantly. You're on probation, even after you do everything right. That slow recovery changes how people think about money. It makes them cautious. Sometimes too cautious. Afraid to use credit, even when it could help. Afraid to take risks. Afraid to breathe. Money becomes a source of constant tension instead of a tool. And this is only the beginning of the story. Because the real damage of missing one credit card payment isn't just financial. It's psychological. It's the way it rewires how safe you feel in your own life. Once that first payment is missed, something subtle changes inside you. It's not loud. No dramatic moment. Just a quiet shift in how you think about money. What used to feel manageable now feels fragile. One mistake proved that everything is closer to the edge than you thought. You start checking your bank balance more often. You hesitate before spending even small amounts. You replay decisions in your head late at night, wondering what you could have done differently. And even when nothing new goes wrong, your body stays tense, like it's waiting for the next hit. This is where the real cost begins to move from your wallet into your mind. Credit scores are strange things. Most people don't fully understand them, but they feel their power. A number you don't control completely starts controlling what kind of life you can build, where you can live, what you can afford, how expensive your mistakes will be. After one missed payment, that number drops. Sometimes not a little, sometimes a lot. And once it drops, every future decision gets filtered through it. You don't just ask, "Can I afford this?" You ask, "Will they approve me?" That question follows you everywhere. You think twice before applying for anything. You delay necessary purchases. You stay in situations longer than you should because changing anything feels risky. When your credit is hurt, stability feels more important than growth. And this affects relationships too. Money stress has a way of sneaking into conversations. Small disagreements turn into big ones. Partners argue about spending, about priorities, about blame. Even when no one says it out loud, there's tension. A sense that everything has to be handled carefully now. People don't realize how exhausting it is to live in constant financial alert mode. You're always calculating, always planning, always trying to stay one step ahead. And that mental load doesn't go away just because you're technically managing. Decision fatigue sets in. Every choice feels heavy. Should I pay extra on the card or save in case something happens? Should I answer this call or ignore it? Should I open this letter now or later? When everything feels urgent, your brain gets tired, and tired brains make mistakes. That's how people fall deeper into debt without realizing it. Interest keeps compounding. Fees keep stacking. Minimum payments barely touch the principal. And suddenly, years go by and the balance hasn't moved the way you expected. You paid, but you didn't progress. This is one of the cruelest tricks of credit cards. They make it feel like you're doing the right thing while keeping you stuck. Paying the minimum feels responsible. But minimum payments are designed to stretch debt, not eliminate it. And when you've already missed a payment, minimums often rise, making progress even slower. People don't fall into debt because they're careless. They fall into it because the system is designed to trap people when they're vulnerable. And once you're trapped, getting out requires more than discipline. It requires extra money, extra time, extra energy. Things most struggling people don't have. This is where shame grows. People feel embarrassed talking about credit card debt. It feels like a personal failure. Something you should have handled better. Something everyone else seems to manage just fine. But that's not reality. Many Americans are carrying balances. Many have missed payments. Many are one emergency away from doing it again. They just don't talk about it. Silence isolates people. And isolation makes problems feel bigger. When people feel ashamed, they avoid help. They don't ask questions. They don't negotiate. They don't explore options like hardship programs or payment plans because they assume they don't deserve relief. Meanwhile, the system keeps charging interest whether you feel ashamed or not. Another hidden cost shows up here. Lost confidence. People start doubting their ability to handle money at all. Even good decisions feel scary. They second-guess themselves. They hesitate, and hesitation can cost opportunities. A job offer in another city, a chance to invest in learning, a move that could improve life. All of it feels risky when your financial foundation feels cracked. Credit damage doesn't just limit access to money. It limits imagination. You stop thinking about what's possible and start thinking only about what's safe, and safety becomes very small. There's also the fear of emergencies. If something goes wrong now, where does the money come from? The credit card that once helped is now maxed or restricted. Savings are thin. Options are limited. That fear lives quietly in the background of everyday life. People avoid doctors, delay car repairs, put off home maintenance, because they don't know how they'd handle another expense. Ironically, avoiding these things often makes future costs worse. One missed payment starts shaping behavior in ways no one warns you about. And recovery is slow. Even if you never miss another payment again, the mark stays for years. You do everything right, but the system remembers what you did wrong. That imbalance feels unfair, and it is. Trust is hard to earn and slow to return. You might pay off the card eventually. You might close the account, but the impact lingers. Higher rates, fewer approvals, more scrutiny, less flexibility. It feels like being punished long after you served the sentence. This long recovery period is why so many people feel stuck. They're not failing now, but they're still paying for the past. And that weight affects motivation. Why try so hard if the reward is so far away? That mindset is dangerous, and it's another hidden cost. Hopelessness. When people lose hope that things will improve, they stop engaging fully. They settle. They cope instead of building. And the system quietly wins again. But here's the truth most people don't hear enough. Missing one payment does not define you. It doesn't mean you're bad with money. It doesn't mean you're irresponsible. It means you're human in a system with very little forgiveness. Understanding that matters, because shame keeps people silent, and silence keeps people stuck. There are ways to recover, ways to negotiate, ways to rebuild slowly. But none of them are instant, and none of them are easy. They require patience in a world that already took too much from you. And this is why the cost of missing one credit card payment is so much more than a late fee. It's the stress you carry, the confidence you lose, the choices you don't make, the future you hesitate to imagine. And we're still not done. Because the final layer of this story isn't about punishment. It's about how people survive it and what they learn along the way. At some point, after the stress settles into your routine, you start realizing something important. You didn't collapse. You didn't disappear. Life didn't end because you missed one payment. You're still here, still moving, still trying. And that matters more than any number on a screen. People adapt. They always do. You learn how to stretch dollars. You learn which expenses matter and which don't. You become more intentional, sometimes out of necessity, sometimes out of fear, But over time, that fear softens into awareness. You understand the system better now. You see its sharp edges. And knowing where the edges are gives you a little more control. Many people don't rebuild their credit because they suddenly get rich. They rebuild it slowly, quietly, one on-time payment at a time, one careful decision after another. Not because it's easy, but because it's possible. The system doesn't advertise this part, but recovery does happen. It's slow. It's frustrating. It requires patience in a culture obsessed with quick wins. But each month you stay consistent, something shifts. Confidence comes back in small pieces. The anxiety doesn't vanish, but it loosens its grip. You stop checking your score every day. You stop holding your breath when the mail arrives. You start thinking beyond survival again. And that's powerful. What many people realize during this process is how deeply credit shapes behavior in America. It's not just a financial tool. It's a social filter. It decides who gets options and who doesn't, who pays more and who pays less, who gets grace and who doesn't. Once you see that clearly, it's hard to unsee it. And that awareness often changes how people talk about money. They become more honest, more careful, less judgmental, because they know how thin the line is between doing fine and falling behind. That empathy is one of the few good things that can come from struggle. People also learn to ask questions they never asked before. Why is one mistake punished for years? Why is interest allowed to compound so aggressively? Why does missing one payment affect housing, insurance, and jobs? Those questions matter, because systems only change when enough people question them instead of blaming themselves. The cost of missing one credit card payment isn't just personal. It's structural. It reveals how little margin exists for ordinary people, how unforgiving the system is when life gets messy. And life always gets messy. Nobody plans emergencies. Nobody schedules hardship. Nobody wakes up thinking, today I'll fall behind. It happens in the middle of everything else. And the system responds without context or compassion. Understanding that doesn't erase responsibility, but it reframes it. It reminds us that financial struggles aren't moral failures. They're often the result of fragile systems meeting real human lives. If you're watching this and you've been there, know this: you're not alone. Millions of people have missed payments, carried balances, rebuilt credit, and moved forward, quietly, without applause, without anyone noticing. And if you're watching this and you haven't been there yet, this isn't meant to scare you. It's meant to inform you, to show you how fast things can change and why awareness matters more than perfection. Because the goal isn't to never make mistakes. The goal is to survive them. Talking about this matters. Sharing these experiences matters. It helps break the illusion that everyone else has it figured out. They're just managing like everyone else. So if this story felt familiar, if it reminded you of a night you stayed up worrying or a decision you wish you could undo, say something. Drop a comment. Even a simple, "This hit close to home," can help someone else feel seen. And if you think this is something more people should understand before they learn it the hard way, share this video. Not to judge, not to lecture, but to start honest conversations about money, stress, and survival in America. Thanks for watching all the way through. Take care of your money, but more importantly, take care of yourself.